can take this off on this video. We've gathered here this afternoon to pay kavod achron, final respects to a wonderful friend, a wonderful human being, a very loving husband, a devoted father and grandfather and great-grandfather, Ernie Bechhofer, Reb David ben Hachava Yosef Dov. We're going to begin with the recitation of Tehillim. I'm going to ask Rabbi Chaim Axelrod, who's the rabbi at the Young Israel of New Rochelle, to please say a capital of Tehillim.
Page 16. Zmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, v'nosdeh sheyar bitzeni, amei menuchos yinaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni, b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech megeit samaves, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha mishantecha, kema yinachamuni, taroch lefanai shocha neget sororoi, vishanta b'shemen roshi kosi rivaya, ach tov v'cheser dir defuni kol yimei chayoi, v'shavti b'veis Adonai liorech yamim.
This morning, when I came into shul for the Daf Yomi, quite early, very soon after Ernie had passed, and I mentioned to the people who all know Ernie so well that Ernie was nifta, had passed, everybody had the same phrase. Ernie was such a good person, such a good person. That was the phrase that came to people. He was a good person. And that's how I would describe Ernie. He was such a good person. Because I'll tell us, the Morris al Adam Kosher. Adam Kosher was a good person, a kosher person. So it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Sofon HaKadosh Baruch Hu counts the tears, and he puts them into his treasure house. The question is, what's an Adam Kosher? I once heard an incredible pshat from Rabbi Pinchas Scheinberg Zatzal, very, very famous Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he said, kosher usually is reserved for food. So in our halachos, in order for an animal to be kosher, it can't be a treifa. It can't have any kind of physical anomalies that would not allow it to live. And he said that among the most sensitive areas in a behemoth, an animal, is the heart and the brain. Those are the most important, the most vulnerable. So that one of the things that the shochet and the boydek has to know is that the brain is intact and that the heart is intact. That's what makes a behemoth kosher. And he said the same thing is true that Chazal was saying about an Adam Kosher. An Adam Kosher is somebody whose mind, his brain, his mind, and his heart are kosher. They're intact, they're wholesome, they're whole. And that's, I think, a perfect definition of Ernie, of David ben Hachava Yosef Dov, because he was that kind of a person. He had a wonderful, wonderful mind. A wonderful mind. He was a devout Jew. I still remember all of the years. Every single morning when Ernie would come with his talis and tefillin, he would daven. Every single morning, he never missed a minyan. Never, in the entire time that he was well, he never once missed a minyan. He was also a person who had a tremendous amount of kibbur avayim. When he would speak about his father, he would speak about his mother, he would speak about the ancestors. He spoke about them with a tremendous amount of kavod, a tremendous amount of honor and dignity. And it was something that was very important to him. As many know, certainly many people know, that Ernie came from one of the more illustrious German families, from Frankfurt, one of the really illustrious families, the Bechhofer family. And it was something that he took a tremendous amount of pride in. I know when he would get an aliyah and we would call up Ben Hachava Yosef Dov, people say, what's a chava? What's a chava? We're not German. What's a chava? And he would say, it's one of the most important people in the entire Kehillah. That was what a chava was. And it was a special honor that was bestowed upon very special people. And he was very, very proud of that. Very proud of that. I once said to him, Ernie, how can we get you to be a chaver? So we'll call you a chaver David. He says, I don't think it's going to happen. But it was something that I thought he was a kind of person who that could happen to. He loved Eretz Yisrael. Now he wore kippas ruga. That was part of his identity because he loved Eretz Yisrael. He was a tremendous Zionist. Years back in our community, he started, because he felt that way about Eretz Yisrael, he started a special stock club. He was a stockbroker. He's a stock club just in Israeli stocks. And it went on for a number of years. I think he even made a profit, I'm not sure. And then it was abandoned for whatever reasons. I guess that had to do with the vagaries of the market in 2008. But that was something that he did that was so unusual. That was his way with his expertise in stocks to be able to help Eretz Yisrael. A very, very important thing. But I think that part of what made Ernie so special, at least in our community, was that all of his sons and his daughters were either Talmidei Chachamim or married to Talmidei Chachamim. And the same thing was true about his grandchildren. All of them were involved so much in the learning of Torah, the dissemination of Torah. I remember when one of the daughters, she was in Chicago. If I'm wrong on the details, I apologize. It's a long time ago. I remember one of the daughters, I think she was in Chicago, and there was a Newsweek article about her that this had incredible inroads in educational philosophy. And he would carry the article. He would show everyone. It's my daughter. This is my daughter. Look, inroads. And she was a person who was a frum person. She was a person whose inroads were in the yeshiva system. And something that made him very, very proud. You say, my son, he used me for using the English names. My son Rabbi just put out another sefer. It's an incredible sefer. It's a wonderful sefer. He was so proud. You can ask him anything about anything. My Rabbi, he knows everything. He knows everything. In learning, he knows everything. Yochanan and Brucey, how proud he was of all the things, of all of his accomplishments, my Brucey, tremendous, and his daughters, of course, goes without saying, very, very proud of his children. Now, a lot can be said. We're fighting against the clock, and a lot more will be said. I just want to end by saying that Edna Bechhofer, such an unusually fine, special woman. They were married for 36 years. And the vast majority of those years were wonderful years, were happy years, were years where there was a tremendous amount of love and romance and mutual respect and understanding. And they got along, they were both German, they got along very, very well, very, very well. And those are the years that in my mind, I'm remembering. I want to remember those years. I want to remember when Ernie was singing Shir Amalos, in the Yekka tradition, every single Yontif, every Suda has their own Shir Amalos. So we were once there, and Ernie was going to sing the special Shir Amalos for that day. And Ernie didn't have a great voice. He didn't. And Edna had to coax him. This is how it goes. It was a note off, 2 notes off, from a sharp to a flat. And it was something that showed the unity of minds and hearts of 2 people. It was l'shema tehila. But the last number of years were very, very difficult years. And Edna did things that nobody else does. I remember when the first thing started, which also was important to remember, when things began to not be natural, and Ernie wasn't sure. Now, how did we see it wasn't natural? Because when the Kaddish came up to Yehesh Shmei Rabbah, he would say the Yehesh Shmei Rabbah very loud. And when the time was to say Amen, he would say Amen very, very loud. Those were the symptoms where things were not 100%. But notice where they came out. They came out in his Yehesh Shmei Rabbah, and they came out in his Amen. And we have a tradition. Kiso, Kaiso, Koso. And when a person has this disease, that's also where a person no longer has barriers. So the natural person comes out. So what's the natural person? The natural person was an Adam Kosher. He was a person that Yeheshmei Rabbah was on his lips, and Amen to every bracha and to every Shavach was on his lips. And that's how Edna treated him until the last second of his life. On Shabbos, she made him a Shabbos. And in the morning, she didn't go to shul. She loves shul. She loves davening. She would stay home and she would daven with him. The whole tefillah, word by word. And then she would go over the Parsha Shavua with him, word by word. And then she would eat together. And then in the afternoon, she would play puzzles with him and she would read him books, picture books. And that's how she was the entire time, to be able to communicate with him on some level. On some level, we don't know the consciousness and the subconsciousness and the pre-consciousness of a person. But the neshama the neshama was there and she understood that. And that's who she had a relationship with, the neshama of Ernie up until the last second. Incredible devotion, incredible love, incredible dedication that we all saw and we can learn from. So to Edna and to the children and to the grandchildren and to the great-grandchildren, there are 25 grandchildren. There were 17 great-grandchildren. But may this be a consolation to you, Edna, and to all of the children, that Ernie was on this earth for many, many decades, and he made the world a better place. He was an Oved Hashem. He was a person who got along beautifully with other human beings and with his family. Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing. I'd like to call upon the eldest son, Rabbi Yosef Gavriel Bechhofer, to say a few words.
Asked Edna how to describe my father, and they said he was an Ish Tam. And in all the years that she knew him, 36 years, he was an Ish Tam. So what is exactly an Ish Tam? The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Ches, says, Sholchu mitam. It's not a coincidence. He sent a message from Eretz Yisrael, which is called Tam. Ways of Ben Olam Haba. Polech Tamim. There's several things which it says there, but the first one is somebody who has Tmimus. And the Maharal explains that Olam Haba is a place which is simple. It's not complex. Complexity comes from Gashmis. Complexity comes from this world. Olam Haba is a simple place. And therefore, a person who is a simple person doesn't have complexities. He doesn't have airs. He doesn't have grandiosity. He's an unav. Such a person is a ben olam haba. That is the person who's ben olam haba. As he says, an unav, a shaif, oil a shaif, nothing. What it goes and comes, benachas, and who possesses sheket and menucha, and therefore does not walk quickly. And as Elliot pointed out to me, my father kept a list of folks who showed up in the papers as having passed away prematurely, unexpectedly, in the course of exercising. That way he justified his not having to exercise. So he was not always went, we know he always went for nachas. And the Reb Chatzkel Levenstein adds, Yaakov Avinu is called Ishtam. The opposite of Yaakov Avinu was Esau. Esau was Ish side, a treacherous person, a person who's lave and whose ain't peeved the libo shavim. His heart and his mouth were not on the same wavelength. With my father, there was the opposite. Obviously, in each time, somebody's peeved the libo shavim, his mouth and his heart are on the same. There's no hypocrisy. There's no wishy-washiness. He's very straight and very straightforward. My father was fond of quoting the famous quote of Breuer. It's hard for you to say in the authentic accent. Besser glat yosher aus glat kausher. That is, yosher is much more important to us than kashrus is. The sin go without any chachmas. My father was a yekka, so I looked up the definition of a yekka, and funnily enough, I found a definition on Chabad.org. A yekka is punctilious and particular. The stereotypical yekka is a creature of habit, reliable, devout, and exact. He or she is also skeptical and ambivalent towards vagaries or anything that cannot be quantified, qualified, and documented. Describes my father to a T. There's a famous Ramban, which I heard the name of Rabbi Merzbach many years ago. Also, says something similar. He says, there's a pasuk in Bereshit, lo yikasamim. Says the word yikas, it's talking about Shevi Yehuda, comes to the Shoresh Yud Kuf Hey, Yekeh. He says, what is the word Yekeh? What does the Shoresh Yud Kuf Hey mean? It says, Lashon Mishmas, the kibul and be to a person who's disciplined and accepts. And this is my father, who was disciplined, as Rabbi Fink said. He davened all the 3 times a day, every day in shul. When he was much younger, he spent many years in South America. And they showed me last night some things he wrote up autobiographically. And he said he wrote that there was no kosher restaurant, so during the week he made do with fruit and vegetables. This for 4 years. He traveled across the entire country of Venezuela and other countries in South America, and he always returned to Caracas for Shabbos. He lived there with a family, but they were far from the shul. So every Shabbos, he went to a hotel in order to be closer to the Shomer Shabbos minyan. Punctilious and particular and devoted. We're saying this with Parsha. Ani Hashem. The Reb Samson Bechhofer said, what is Ani Hashem? What do you mean? I am God. He says, the godly trait in man is willingness to forget completely whatever wrong one may have suffered. As one of my siblings said to me, my father never held grudges. The other person won't know you hold a grudge anyway. Why bother? My father was always the saver upon the office. He was always a good humor, positive, upbeat, and optimistic. Some of that is a quote from one of my friends. And forgo. My father would let anything go. The Ma'ara that we mentioned before says that Anova comes together with Torah. And my father loved learning Torah. You look forward every week to Rabbi Abish. He had several chavusas, some of which he didn't enjoy learning with, but he continued to learn with them because it was a chesed. I want to tell you a story, which first of all, I want to say that when I learned with him in the last few years, I used to come when he still was cognizant, and he was not fully there, but he lit up. When I was sitting learning Gemara with him, he lit up, he was engaged, he was focused. And there's a story about him, although this is not necessarily, it's an interesting story, although it didn't come to fruition, perhaps came to fruition a little bit. When my father was in the army, he got a speeding ticket and on the army base. So the chaplain came and testified on his behalf, character witness, Chaplain Dana. And Chaplain Dana said, my father was a very upstanding, honest person. He was going to, when he left the army, he was going to go to rabbinical school. Okay? So there was obviously some emistat which came out in the future generations. My father loved the after Kipshuto. He always was very much loved all of us, and he always warned us: stay away from plastic bags. Don't ride in the back of the buses in Israel because the bombs are in the back of the bus. Look both ways before you cross. He had this all the time. But his real love of his life, the true love of his life, was Edna. Edna told me they met on a Wednesday, and every Wednesday for the next 3.5 years until Edna told him to stop, he would send Edna a rose. And he loved music before, but as you can tell, I have my father's voice. And we're not particularly musically inclined. Edna made him love music more. What Edna did, which was amazing, and shows how much love that my father had for Edna, was she convinced him to like baseball. My father, when we found baseball the most boring sport in the world. But Edna, for her, anything, even baseball. And Edna told me that after concerts in the city, he would come in at 11 p.m. to pick her up. He didn't have to do that because of his tremendous love for her. And and also somebody recalls particularly the 50th birthday party, which my father made for her. My father was an Onav, as we said. I wanted to mention, my father was an avid hockey fan, but he was even such an Onav that he wrote, his hero was Nick Mikowski, who he writes was not actually a great player. So even in his, he didn't look for the top, he appreciated that Nova and the hockey players too. Reb Samson Bechhofer says, again, the Haftarah Le'achar Mocha, he says that the Ava is language of Chag, to give. And with the Aleph is as individuality. And my father was obviously given much, very much by the Rav, Rabbanim, by the community. When my father went to shul, it was a communal effort. It was extraordinary how the community overlooked certain things and other things. Okay, my father overlooked certain, you overlooked certain things, and that was incredible. You made sure you come to davening, that was amazing, and many things which I of course don't know. And the community, we appreciate so much the community for that, and we appreciate Ellie, of course, what he did for my father, and we appreciate very, very much what Stephen Arma and the other caregivers did for my father with other devotion throughout the years, and of course, above all, we children have to appreciate that. We have to have tremendous appreciation, which we cannot even state. Now we ask them to
Please mute yourself.
are having fallen short if we have not done something which was my father was a Royal Boy Scout, and this was and the said that he thinks that his please be quiet on the chat. My father, and the things that my father's memorizing the Boy Scout motto, oath, was what really contributed to building his character. By the way, the Boy Scout oath is my contribution to turn their parents. And Boy Scout oath is: a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, and reverent. Again, my father. Included. One of the mitzvahs that my father was most makpid on was the mitzvah of Kir Shema Amidah. He was devoted to Kir Shema Amidah. He said it very carefully, Mila b'Mila, every night. And perhaps this is appropriate for us to say because B'Yadcha Af Kidduchi. This is the Kodesh Baruch Hu. We said B'Yadcha Af Kidduchi in Shema about every night time, but also my father, his ruach is in Shammai, with his pashtus, his anova, with no heirs, with his complete devotion to Edna, with all of his good midos tovos, with his savior panim yafos. He should be a meli tziyosha for us and for all of Am Yisrael, for all of the community. And in the name of my siblings, I'd like to ask Mekila for things which we have perhaps fell short. We fell short of many things. Father would say, forget about it. It's nothing. But they're very precious to us. Watch over you.
Please mute yourself. Who's in the restaurant?
Representing the grandchildren, I'd like to ask Yitzchok Bechhofer to speak.
I don't really feel like I'm the proper person to send up there, but I am the oldest, so I guess in that capacity, I'll speak for the oldest boy. In that capacity, I will speak on behalf of the grandchildren as was requested. I personally miss Opa tremendously for a long time. I remember those calls. What's cooking? That's what I remember the most. And just it was always so positive and upbeat, and it was always just fun. And I remember specifically, something that stands out is when we were kids, he took us to a hockey game, and he loved it, and that was he was just passionate about being good to people, and that's something that I appreciate. I want to say also just a quick Dvar Torah. It says in this week's parsha, Ish imay v'aviv tiro. A person has to fear his mother and his father, and Rashi brings down that there's a different pasuk, Kabed Esavicha V'Esimecha, where the father is put before the mother. So Rashi answers, I saw a different answer that's brought down that the mother's job is to instill Yiras Shamayim in the children, and that's why when it comes to yiras, to fear of your parents, reverence of your parents, the mother is put first. But kavod represents the meat of chachma, and it's the father's job to instill chachma in his children. And if we take a look at the experiments that were done, just the children, the chachma that is in all the children and in the children-in-law, it's clear that Opaz was able to instill that midah of chachma and that appreciation for learning and in his children, and that's something that is very special. And I would like to take this moment also on behalf of all the other grandchildren to ask Opa for mechila in public for not respecting them enough or whatever possibly could have been done better. And we will all definitely miss you tremendously, and already do. Thank you.
I want to ask Ernie's nephew, who was the son of Ernie's beloved brother, Samson Bechhofer, to please share his thoughts with us.
Rabbi Fink, and Edda asked that someone speak in the name of the greater Bechhofer family. Rabbi Fink already said it is a great family. It is an illustrious family. And I stand here as a representative of my cousins, Uncle Ernie's nephews and nieces, who all had a very good relationship with him and appreciated him very much. I sent an email to my mother this morning after I informed her about the Patira, and I just asked her what comes to mind when you think about Uncle Ernie. And she wrote back to me, he was the kindest and warmest of the four brothers. That's, I brought a smile to me because that was really true, and that said it all. We've already spoken about his modesty, other speakers have spoken about it, how he is machshav tefillah b'tzibur. My mother mentioned that as well. He said he was told he never missed a mincha, which for a businessman is a very great achievement. He was our fun uncle. My brothers and I will not repeat the expression that he used often to describe something that he didn't like. It's a word in German, which I think a lot of you know what it is, but I won't say it here as Levaya. But it always brought a chuckle to our faces. When I say he was a fun uncle, my earliest memory of him was when I was 5 years old, and we were in our apartment, and he proceeded to demonstrate to me how to hit a baseball. But it was in the apartment though, so it was a little bit strange. But he was very concerned that I know how to play baseball, and as a result of that, because he showed me, even though I'm left-handed, because he showed me how to do it. For the rest of my life, I ended up playing baseball as a right-handed player, even though that was not my natural position. But that was all due to Uncle Ernie. I'm surprised that since Rabbi mentioned his love for hockey, I'm surprised that maybe Rabbi doesn't know that he didn't connect it to the fact that Uncle Ernie was nifter on the same day as the triple overtime loss that the Rangers suffered last night. But a very unusual and interesting game, which, had he been aware of it, probably would have excited him tremendously, even though they lost. He was a proud father and grandfather, and he had much to be proud of, as we know. Probably mentioned the fact that he was proud of his German heritage. Some of us don't like to use the word Yeka too much, but that's true. It's true. And as mentioned, he was Ben Achover, Yosef Dov, our grandfather. And to me, at least, it's an interesting coincidence that today, the 3rd of Iyar, happens to be the yahrzeit of our grandfather, Rabbi Yosef Breuer. So our Uncle Ernie and Rabbi Breuer share the same yahrzeit. And having mentioned that, I just want to quote something from an essay that my grandfather Zatzal wrote on the subject of Kaddish, which may be appropriate for this gathering. I'm going to read from the essay. Kaddish is not a prayer in the usual sense. It is certainly not a mass for the dead. On the contrary, it is a dramatic call for action, the tzibur, which concludes every major part of our tefillah. The Kaddish declares the outcome of the awareness we gain throughout tefillos and of the positive intentions they create in us. In the Kaddish, the Chazan or the Ovel expresses the strong hope that ultimately God's name will be recognized in all its greatness and sacredness by a world which he has created in accordance with his will. This means that all God-willed goals will find their realization in a world formed by the free will of the Creator, a world that will ultimately recognize the sole authority and divine relationship. Every ounce of human energy must serve the realization of that goal. Thus, the call of the Chazan or the Ovel to the congregation is the following: help hasten the attainment of this goal. Help, bless the name of God. The congregation answers this call with Amen. The Kaddish on the lips of the survivors constitutes a blessing for the departed. His failures and mistakes may have been due to human frailty, but the good that he has striven for and accomplished in his lifetime secures for his existence on earth a lasting significance and meaning in the eyes of God. This is true all the more if he succeeded in inspiring others to live up to the divine